Hi, everyone. I'm Abigail. This is Owen, and welcome to another Two Kids interview. We are joined by award-winning middle grade author Jenn Bishop. Ms. Bishop has written the books The Distance to Home, 14 Hollow Road, Things You Can't Say, where, where We Used to Roam, and her book that just came out this week, Free Throws, Friendship, and Other Things We Fouled Up. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Tell us why you enjoy writing sports books.
So I enjoy writing sports books because I am a huge fan of sports teams. So my first book, The Distance to Home, is a baseball story because for a long time, baseball was my favorite. And these days, basketball is my favorite. So that's how I came to write my new book, Free Throws.
We got to read and review Free Throws, Friendship, and Other Things We Followed Up, and we loved it. I think our only criticism is how long the title is.
The title is long. I start calling it Free Throws sometimes. Feel free to call it Free Throws.
Can you tell us how you came up with the idea for it?
Yeah, so I find that for my stories, they tend to start as like a seed or a lightning bolt. And my seed stories is like a little seed gets planted and it takes a while for me to come up with the whole story. But this book is more of a lightning bolt. I really loved watching my basketball team play in March Madness. But then when they lost earlier than I would have liked them to, I had started all these ideas for the story. So really a lot of it started coming into my head together really quickly during March 2018.
In Free Throws, did you always decide to write the book from multiple perspectives?
Yeah, from the very first draft, it was in two points of view. I thought that would be helpful for a reader who was new to Cincinnati to have Rory be like the point of view character, but then I also loved having a character who'd been there for a while. But yeah, I always thought of it as a rivalry story from two points of view.
Your book, Things You Can't Say, deals with the topic of suicide. Why was it important for you to write it? And did you ever get overwhelmed when doing the research?
Yeah, so Things You Can't Say was a book that for me kind of came, that was one of more of my seed stories where I just knew I had this boy character and I knew about this man who was going to come on a motorcycle. I didn't know what really would happen in that story until I got deeper into it. And so as I got deeper into it, I realized what Drew, the main character, was dealing with, which was the suicide of his father, which happened 3 years before the book begins. And so that book stretched me in a lot of ways because it's from the point of view of a boy. I was never a boy. And he was dealing with stuff that I'd never dealt with personally. So it was a book that I had to do a lot of research for. And it was a book that was pretty emotional to write, to really think about how these things would have impacted Drew. Yeah.
This past summer, we interviewed wonderful author and person, Rita Williams Garcia. Can you tell us about your connection with her?
Yeah, so Rita Williams Garcia was my advisor at Vermont College of Fine Arts. So she was the very first reader of my first book, The Distance to Home, and it was a very first draft. So she was amazing. I had to work with her for 6 months, and she's just a wonderful person, just a brilliant writer, and she was such a good mentor for me.
You write books for kids our age. Thank you for that. Why are we the age group you enjoy writing for?
Yeah, I feel like your age is sort of where I completely fell in love with books. That was where, I first kind of dealt with books that dealt with more difficult topics, books that dealt with the real world. I feel like at your age, kids are just kind of you're figuring things out in a really profound way. And so I think it's fun to write for an age where there's so much processing of things that are going on in the world and making sense of it as you're also trying to figure out who you are.
True. Do you have to change your mindset at all when you are writing for different characters in your books?
Oh, that's a good question. For each book, I'm kind of working on that book for several years, so I'm not jumping between things. So I start to get sort of used to jumping back into that character. But it is true that each character does have like lots of, unique challenges from their own life that they're bringing to the story. But I'll admit it's not something I consciously think about a lot. I think it just happens by nature of just kind of staying in that project, that I'm just staying in the mindset of that character too.
What is your process when putting a book together? Do you decide the end before the middle, or do you put it together in order?
Hey. So every book's a little bit different. Most of my books, I have a sense of where I'm going towards the end, but I'm a little bit of, I don't know if you've heard about like plotters and pantsers. And so plotters like to plan out what's going to happen in the story, and pantsers sort of right by the seat of their pants. And so with more of my earlier stories, I was more of a pantser, and I'm trying to become a pantser who's like a little bit of a plotter. So I do tend to sort of figure out like some things that are going to happen in the middle. But for me, a lot of the fun of writing is not knowing exactly what's going to happen in my story. So I still like to be surprised.
Can you tell us about the most meaningful experience you've had talking to a student during a school visit?
Ooh, ooh. I have to think about that one. I do remember in a virtual visit once that a student first asked me, like, when was the first time that you realized that words have power? I don't remember my answer to that question, but I feel like that was like a profound moment initiated by a student who really wanted to ask like the kind of tough questions that make you think. If that makes sense. Yeah. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to do a lot of school visits because of the pandemic. So I'm just kind of getting back into the swing of school visits the last year.
We have interviewed a number of authors who've had books banned. That means in those places, kids don't have the same access to books that we have and may not be able to see themselves represented in books. Can you give us your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's really concerning to see so many book bans happening in our country right now. I used to be a librarian, and so I know how it should work when someone is concerned about a book. We used to have this form at the library that we'd have somebody fill out, and then the person who was responsible for the book being in the collection would revisit that item, and the person who was concerned wanting to have it removed would like have to explain their reasons for why. But usually it did not end in the book having to leave the library. So it's scary for me to see a lot of libraries and states, removing huge numbers of books. And it seems like the goal is really to quiet certain voices in this country. So I am really concerned about it. And it's something I try to raise awareness about, and that I'm constantly trying to, make sure my publisher is aware of the things that are happening. I have not had any of my books banned to my knowledge, but I think my book, Where We Used to Roam, could currently not be on the shelf in a library in Florida. I haven't seen it on a list, but based on some of their criteria, I think if they knew those components were in my book, that they would not have it on their shelves. So sad and scary. All kids deserve to see their realities reflected in their books, is what I believe.
We agree. Rejection is a part of most writers' stories. Can you tell us about that part of your journey?
Rejection is a common part of most writers' stories, and it's still a part of my story. This book was rejected by my editor at the publisher I was at beforehand. And so my agent and I were like, we still believe it could find a house somewhere else. And it did, sure did. But yeah, it took me several books until I published. So I was looking over all the books I'd written, and the first 2 stories I wrote and tried to find an agent with, I could not find an agent. All I got back were no's. But I kept with it. And then with that third book, which is Distance to Home, I sent out letters to like 60 agents, and I got 1 yes, which is like 50 something no's, right? So like the ratio of yeses to no's is always like way more no's than yeses. And as an author, you need to find a way to just keep persisting past that, and to believe in yourself and surround yourself with other people who help you make your books better, but who aren't like, sort of standing in your way. Yeah.
Tell us your thoughts. And if you are concerned at all about artificial intelligence and its future impact on publishing?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. Nobody's asked me about this yet, but I feel like AI has become such a big thing the last couple of years with AI and ChatGPT. And I can see why it's a fun tool to play with, but I don't think that I first of all don't think it's very good at writing fiction so far. But I believe that, art is about the human experience. And so I think that art that is made by essentially a robot is not art that I am interested in supporting with my dollars. I hope that that we can find legal ways to make sure that the people who are creating art continue to get paid for the art they make and that their art is not stolen. Because actually, my first book, The Distance to Home, was used in making of one of those chat bots. They went and they harvested all of these novels, and I found out that mine was among them. So it was pretty kind of a bummer of a day to realize that something you spent all those years on is being used to like help future robots write books instead of humans.
Writing a book is a big commitment. So when you get an idea, how do you become sure that this is a story you want to tell?
Oh, I am sure it's a story I want to tell when I care about it for more than a couple weeks. I've definitely had some false starts where I'm like, I think this should be a book. And then if my interest is waning, then there's no way anyone else is going to be interested. So it's about whether it's maintaining my interest, but then also I like to send out the first 30, 40 pages to my writing group. And it really helps to hear, are they interested? And if they aren't, like what is not appealing to them, or like what is kind of standing in the way. And I've had some projects that they were like interested, but then I followed it all the way through and they're like, it still needs work, which is fine. Some books just take longer to cook than others.
What writer had the most influence on you?
So I think it's hard to say like any individual writer. I think I was a lot influenced by the kind of books that I loved when I was your age. So for me, that was the Alice series by Phyllis Reynolds Naylor and Judy Blume's books and the Babysitter's Club. Basically a bunch of realistic fiction that I read were very influential for me.
What advice do you have for young writers?
My biggest advice to young writers is to read. I feel like reading is what makes us writers. If you are not enjoying reading, then I think it'd be hard to be a writer. And I think the other part is obviously if you're interested in writing, like write. Some people will always say like, oh, I've always wanted to write a novel. And it's like, have you? And they're like, no, I just haven't gotten around to it yet. So I think that is another really key component is if you're interested in something, you have to do that thing to find out if you actually like it. And then there's lots of practice involved in getting better at writing, just like there's practice involved in getting better at everything that you're interested in. Yeah.
That's big advice. Do you also have a smaller tip, something you do when you're writing that maybe a lot of people don't?
Okay, so maybe my big tip is if you like writing, is reading what you write out loud. So that's like a very practicable tip, right? So when I write a draft, like I feel like it's helpful for me to read it out loud because I can find out, am I repeating myself? Did I say what I wanted to say? Does it flow well? Does it sound like a real human? All of those things are helpful and are really noticeable if you read your own work out loud.
It's about a project you are working on now.
So I'm currently working on a book that is a little bit related to this book, and we'll see what happens with it. It's actually historical fiction. So it takes the character Sister Louisa from Free Throws and jumps back to the year 1960. And it's about her and her basketball journey in 1960. So I hope something will happen with it, but it might take a little while for it to cook still. We'll see.
Finally, it's time for our Turbo 10. 10 rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
I hope so.
Number 1, what is your favorite phrase to use?
Favorite phrase to use? Like in writing? I'm not doing very good at turbo time.
Anything.
Oh, this is too hard. I don't know. It's a terrible answer. Yeah, I don't think I have like a phrase. Sorry.
Oh, let's go into the second question.
Yeah.
What is one subject you love to learn more about?
So I'm doing really bad at this time. Space exploration.
That seems right. Number 3, what is your go-to snack food?
Oh, chocolate. That's an easy one.
Number 4, what was your absolute favorite book growing up?
My favorite book was A Summer to Die by Lois Lowry.
Number 5, if you could teleport somewhere right now, where would you go?
Oh, teleport. I've always wanted to go to Hawaii, but I don't like long flights, so Hawaii.
If you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Oh, fast forwarding and rewinding.
Makes sense. Number 7. What was your favorite cartoon as a kid?
Oh, I didn't watch a lot of cartoons. Arthur. It's not exactly a cartoon, but a show. Cartoon show.
What is your favorite rainy day activity?
Hanging out with my cat.
Number 9. If you could have any 3 dinner guests, who'd they be?
Ooh. Living, they can be living or dead?
No rules.
No
Even a
rule.
fictional character.
Okay. I want to have fictional characters. Okay, we're gonna go hang out with Anne Shirley from Anne of Green Gables and Ramona Quimby and um like Harriet from Harriet the Spy.
Number 10. What is the best piece of advice you were given?
The best piece of advice I was given ever. I don't know. I think just I don't know who like told me. It's not like someone told me this, but just like sort of like that you are your own biggest fan. Like you have to believe in yourself is like vital if you want to do things.
Awesome. Thank you so much for doing that. And thank you so much for spending this time with us. We can't wait to read your future books.
Thanks so much for having me. This was fun.